Okay, I guess we got something going on. All right, here we go. Okay, what we want to talk about today is the comparison between coal generating electricity in the U.S. and solar generating electricity in the U.S. And if anybody tells you, and they certainly do tell you this on Fox News, that coal is cheaper, they're pretty much full of shit. Dog shit, actually. Because today, it ain't true. It might have been true 20 years ago. It was arguably true 10 years ago. It's definitely not true today. In fact, it ain't even close. And here's why. First off, let's talk a little bit of history, then we'll talk a little bit about health, and then we'll just really press the metal down, put it all together, and everybody will run out and buy solar panels. Anyway, the history is when Jimmy Carter was president, we all remember that, in the 70s. We hope we remember that. It's when Led Zeppelin was playing. Everybody remembers that. Zeppelin. Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House. At that time, it cost $76 a watt to make electricity. Now, how much is a watt? Well, everybody knows what a 100-watt light bulb is. So if you take 100 and multiply it times 76, you get $7,600 in order to generate enough power to run a light bulb, a 100-watt light bulb. $7,000 sounds pretty expensive. Today, some 23 plus 14, that's 37 years later, you can make a watt for 76 cents. That's 100 times cheaper. In other words, $76 would run a 100-watt light bulb. And the panel, since it lasts for 20 years, some of them are lasting now 30 years, 30 years worth of running a light bulb for 76 bucks turns out to be pretty damn cheap. So the point is, basically, all of solar costs have been plunging, absolutely plunging. In fact, if you want to bring it down to the here and now, in the last 5 years, 75% cheaper, just in the last 5 years. So most of us that are arguing, oh geez, you know, solar's expensive, we can't do that, God, nobody should go there, why would you spend that much money? You're pretty much out of date, because costs have just been plunging. Now, why are they plunging? Because China's building it, because Germany's going solar. Sweden, some of these countries have even pledged that they're going to use no fossil fuels. I believe that Sweden and Norway have made pledges that they're going to be pretty much off fossil fuels in the next 10 years. So it's the scale of production. The more you make, the cheaper they get. You increase your efficiencies, and they're getting really, really cheap. Now, the other thing to talk about is when you compare solar to coal, coal has all kinds of externalities. To use an economic term, it's kind of fancy, it's got a lot of syllables, externalities. That basically means hidden costs, things that are not included in the cost that you pay to buy electricity from a coal-fired plant. Well, that includes things like air pollution. When you burn coal, you're sending up sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxides and a whole ton of carbon dioxide, which we know is mostly responsible for climate change. We know that. 98% of the scientists in the world know that. The only 2% that don't are pretty much hired by ExxonMobil. So, there are all these externalities. What about health stuff? When they send that pollution up in the air, what happens to it? Well, a lot of the biggest plants are out in the Midwest, in Ohio, Illinois, Pennsylvania, quite a few in Tennessee, Kentucky. And they got these big, giant smokestacks, and they send it right up in the air. Get it out of there, right up nice and high, and it stays up there for quite a while. And then it turns out that it has a tendency to kind of percolate eastward with the prevailing westerly winds, and it ends up raining down on places like us in Maine. And it just happens to be no coincidence whatsoever that the state with the highest asthma rates in the country is that nice clean state of Maine where life is as it should be, but it turns out that we have some of the worst air and the highest asthma rates because we have pollution from coal plants raining down on us. Now, we don't like to talk about it very much because it keeps the tourists at bay, and geez, that makes everybody nervous. But that's the truth. And there are other things that they send up, like mercury. Myself, I happen to kind of like loons. Here's a loon. Nice little fuzzy bird. It kind of symbolizes and embodies the wilderness. And people pay a lot of money to come up here and hang out in cabins and listen to a loon go, that just thrills them to death. And I understand that. I feel the same way. But turns out loons aren't doing very good because they got a lot of mercury in the system. When they got mercury in the system, it hurts the eggs and the eggshells, and they're much less likely to have babies. Hence, the population is quite at risk. There are not very many loons out there. So that's another thing. You got your air pollution. You got water pollution. Now, I'm sure the people in West Virginia would tell you that water pollution is no joke because 300,000 of them just recently, as we all know, lost their ability to drink water out of the taps. Now, why'd that happen? Well, because some chemical that's used to scrub the coal, you got to have it clean before you use it. That chemical was stored in a tank that then leaked into a river and polluted the water so bad that you weren't even supposed to put it on your face, let alone drink it. That went on for weeks. Hundreds of thousands of people. It's tarnished the reputation of West Virginia. When people think about going there, they're going to be turning their taps on in the motels wondering, gee, should I drink this stuff? It doesn't have a very good effect on tourism, I'm sure of that. So you've got water pollution, you've got air pollution from coal plants, you've got the miners themselves who work down in the mines. They got black lung problems, they got people die in the mines all the time. There's all kinds of health problems associated with what is very hard work. So there's a lot of these external costs. Now, almost none of those are incorporated into the price of coal. And even so, at today's rates, when you build a new coal plant in America, it costs somewhere between 10 to 14 cents a kilowatt an hour to make energy, to make electricity from coal. And this year, right now, they just opened a 500 megawatt plant in New Mexico. Now, 500 megawatts is roughly enough electricity to power 5,000 homes. That's a fair amount of power. And that was erected in Austin, Texas. And it sold the electricity for a profit. They were in for a profit. That's why they built it. And they sold it wholesale to a provider for 5.8 cents a kilowatt hour. That's roughly half of what it costs to make a coal plant, not including all the externalities we just talked about. In other words, the health costs, the pollution, global warming, climate change. None of that is incorporated into coal, and yet solar still beats it by almost 50%. And what happens on a solar plant when they have a spill or an accident? Well, it's pretty much happening right now outside. It's called a nice day. It's when the sun shines. It's a nice day. So there you have it. Pretty much in black and white. Which should you choose?